Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Cormus, Associate Dean and Chief Marketing Officer here at Georgetown's McDonough School of Business. Esme here and I welcome you to the 2018 Hariri Symposium and Bust Unveiling. Thank you for joining us this evening in the beautiful Lohrfink Hariri building, which is about 9 years now, and it's been our home. This is the first year we're using TED-style talks for our Hariri Symposium, and it was an idea that Esme and I came up with over lunch, and she could tell you a little bit about why we thought this might be appropriate for tonight.
So again, thank you all for being here. My name is Esme Rogers, and here on campus I serve as the Student Government EVP for the full-time MBA program. And in that space, I've been asked a lot of questions about what do we discuss as business school students. And I was prompted with how do we create the spaces to have those deeper conversations? Often we only talk about grades, recruiting, classes, but what are we really, who are we really? What do we do outside of this building? What do we bring into this building as students of the McDonough School of Business? So that's where this idea came from. I wanted to give our peers an opportunity to dig a little deeper and share who they are beyond what we typically talk about in a classroom.
Thank you very much, Esme. It's now my honor to introduce our Dean, Paul Almeida. Dean Almeida is a professor of strategy who has been part of our community for more than 20 years. He's also a Georgetown parent. He's taught thousands of students here. He's a former senior associate dean for executive education and our former deputy dean for innovation. He's a true innovator and an inspirational leader. So please join me in welcoming Dean Almeida.
Thanks, Chris and Esme. Good evening, and welcome to Georgetown McDonough School of Business for our annual Hariri Symposium. Named for Rosenfeld Hariri, the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, a dedicated supporter of education around the world, and a Georgetown parent. We are excited this evening to unveil the Hariri bust in his honor. I would like to thank Rosenfeld Bizuri, Christian Buck, and David Thompson of the Hariri Foundation for attending this evening and for commissioning the bust of Mr. Hariri, created by the talented artist, Marty Eichinger. Marty, we're very glad to have you with us tonight. To begin, we have a wonderful program of 4 TED-style talks from students representing our undergraduate, full-time, evening MBA, and executive masters in leadership programs on the topic, Once I Was Lost. We've all been lost at some point in time. That's when things become difficult and complicated. Yet, those are also the times we learn the most about ourselves and what we're really capable of doing. I appreciate the 4 students who will be presenting tonight and the many more who submitted proposals for their willingness to share something about themselves, something which is probably very deep and personal. One of the wonderful things about our student community across all our programs is that our students learn just as much from the experiences of others as they do in the classroom. This is the key to our educational mission. Before we begin, I would like to thank the team that created this event, starting with the MBA student, Esme Thea Rogers. Thank you, Esme. Our Associate Dean and Chief Marketing Officer, Chris Cormus, for developing the TED-style concept for our student talks. We also have others to thank: Senior Associate Dean of the Undergraduate Program, Patricia Grant, the Director of Events, Stephanie Martineau, for joining Esme and Chris in vetting these many proposals and interviewing the students. I'd like to thank our Associate Dean and Chief Operating Officer, Lynn Devers, and former staff member, Jim Moore, for working with Marty and the Hariri Foundation to envision and create the Hariri bust. This is sure to be another memorable Hariri Symposium. No pressure. Thank you.
I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker this evening. Tamiko Collins is a native Washingtonian with a calling for public service and the empowerment of youth through mentorship and spoken word. Her grounding and values were formed in the diverse culture of Washington, D.C., and her leadership was forged during her years as an Army non-commissioned officer. She is currently enrolled in the Georgetown Executive Masters in Leadership program. And with that, I present Tamiko Collins.
I'm bleeding. Can't you see the stains? My daddy's blues are suffocating my veins. I try to refrain from this toxic strain of smoke, but these are my daddy's blues that's infiltrating my soul, that's got me spiraling down cancerous holes. I hold on to hope that one day these blues will stray, but they never do, you see. I'm a glass half full kind of girl. I gotta believe the hype. Society, trite. And daddy, he's out again, but ain't never gonna be right. I write this poetic prose for those who hold up their nose. I mean, the establishment's kind of old. How can a halfway house ever make my daddy whole? I'm choking. Can't you see my face turning blue and my daddy's blues are still sifting through? I had to be a superhero for my daddy since I was like 10, but now I'm tired of this play, make, pretend. I don't know. Maybe my daddy did what he did because he simply didn't have any ends, or perhaps he just got involved with the wrong group of friends. But all I know now is that the lawyer's high sedition and judge's recommendation, incarceration, drug rehabilitation, incarceration. As he pontificates, Miss Reed is for the good of mankind, the good of mankind. Well, mankind, my daddy's getting old, and maybe one day he's gonna die living in a hole, but right now, I got my daddy's soul. Gotta be his mouthpiece, gotta step in his shoes, gotta put on my suit of armor and take on my daddy's blues. These are my daddy's blues. I write for every little girl that's ever cried herself to sleep at night, black, yellow, and white. Eyes wide shut, souls wide awake, clutching their little chests, pondering their daddy's fate. Because here's a flash of news. Drug rehabilitation is not synonymous. I'm going to say it again. Drug rehabilitation is not synonymous with incarceration. And these are my daddy's blues. These are my daddy's blues. So when I would perform that, I would wait to hear some snaps at the end or something. Well, no. I'm just saying, you didn't know I was finished. But I would wait to hear that, or I would wait to hear the doo-doo-doo. In the poetry world, that means, okay, yeah, great job. You can move on to the next. Piece. But as I was told several times by my friends and family, Miko, this is not a poetry slam. This is not a poetry event. This is a speech, and you're going to have to write a speech. So, okay. I have one confession. First of all, my name is Tamiko Collins. I'm honored to be able to speak in front of you all on the topic Once I Was Lost. # exceeded expectations. Thank you very much. I will tell you one thing. I figured out why it is difficult for me to write speeches, maybe because I can't say the word, but I figured out why it was kind of difficult, because writing a speech and talking to someone, for me, puts me in a state of vulnerability. I feel quite vulnerable talking to you one-on-one about my life, telling you the intricate details and everything. But when I tell my life in a poem, I feel like I'm hiding behind something. And what I have learned from these 7 months in the Executive Master's program is that you can't hide. You have to be authentic. To be authentic, you have to be seen, and you have to show up as you are. And so here I am, showing up as I am with a speech that I am trembling on the inside, but I'm going to be tough on the outside, and I'm going to get started, okay? So once I was lost, I grew up in Washington, D.C., a few blocks from Capitol Hill. And it was a very underprivileged, impoverished, limited resources, basically forgotten neighborhood. And the funny thing is I see some looks on several people's faces, and it's like when you mention Capitol Hill and you mention underprivileged, it's so bizarre. But I'm not talking about Capitol Hill now where you have tapas bars and nice rooftops and karaoke and the intermingling and commingling of cultures as such. I am talking about the late 80s, and I'm telling my age now. I'm talking about the late 80s and early 90s, right? Where crack was rampant, heroin was a big deal, and crack houses, and also used jeans. Maybe some people in this section know about it, maybe not so much. Used jeans was big back then, and I used to cut up makeup hair anyway, and hip hop was huge, and everybody wanted to be a rapper, including me. And I think my name was Miko the Magnificent or something, but don't quote me on that. So needless to say, I did not make it as a rapper. Maybe I did one demo or something, and it didn't work out for me, so it's out the window. At any rate, I remember growing up in a 2-bedroom apartment, and it was about 6 of us. And I remember one day looking out the window, and I saw my mother. And I didn't think that she saw me. And this is maybe a little difficult because I'm looking right at my mother. But, and I didn't think, it was all clear to have this conversation, guys, just want to let you all know. But I didn't think that she saw me looking, and she was buying drugs from a drug dealer. And the look that I expected to see on her face was kind of like, whatever, I don't care, because I felt that I was forgotten anyway. But the look on her face was that of pure, oh my God, my daughter sees me doing this. To this day, I remember that look because it helped shape me. It helped shape how I thought of her. Because whatever took a hold of her, so to speak, was not something that she asked for. It's not something that at the time she could even control. And so I never, unbeknownst to you, Mom, I never held her accountable for that. I always just looked at it as this is a sickness, and clearly, you know, she wants some help with it. But I was maybe 10 or 11 at the time, so I couldn't. So, Abraham Lincoln said, if you want to predict the future, create it. All of our lives, we've been told that you cannot predict the future, right? But then Abraham Lincoln said, if you want to predict it, you got to create it. You probably say you have to create it, didn't you? Say you got to create it. But so you have to create it. So from that moment on, from all the rides back and forth to visit my father in different prisons, from all of the times thinking that I don't know if I'm going to be a drug addict, I don't know if I'm going to be a stripper, I don't know if I'm going to be sold for prostitution for drugs. I just didn't know. And not because those things were happening, because my mother did her due diligence by giving me to my grandmother. You know, she wanted to make sure I was taken care of and I wasn't in the system. So that's why I call it a unconscious neglect. She didn't do it on purpose. She wanted me to be taken care of. But still, during that time, I had no idea what my future held. And one time that, if you all read the little blurb, if I'm going to be a Me Too movement, okay, this is where it gets a little deep, guys, all right? So just bear with me for a minute. I promise I'll lighten it back up. But 14 years old, I thought I was going to die. And I don't mean that by, oh my gosh, I didn't turn in my paper, the professor's going to kill me, I'm going to die. I mean it more so. I ended up in my friend's bathroom bleeding. And it was at that time when my grandmother came and she said, "You're pregnant." She was so angry. And it was at that time that I had to tell her, "It's by your son, my uncle." Okay? I had to tell her that. And she said, actually, I don't even want to put words in her mouth. I honestly cannot remember what she said. I know the look on her face was was one I'd never seen before. And they rushed me to the hospital, and we were very religious, and we couldn't take blood. So I recall looking at the bedside pan at a face that was as white as the palm of my hand or whiter, hearing the doctor saying, "Ma'am, if you don't give her blood, she's going to die." And they said she's willing to die for this because I believed in a religion that much. I was 14, and I was like, oh my God, I wanted to be a rapper. I'm trying to die. Like, how does this happen, you know? And the irony is that did run through my mind. That's so insane. But, you know, I was 14. And so those things that happened to me, I mentioned them here, not for someone to feel so, oh no, poor her, but for people to see that the audacity of hope, for people to see resiliency. Webster's defines, Google, Webster's just sound more authentic, okay? So Google defined resiliency as basically the ability to bounce back from a tough situation, the ability to keep going when bad things happen, to put it in layman's terms. And it was at that time that when I was laying on the bed and it was life and death, and I was being told that I have to choose death so that I could save my life. If there are any spiritual individuals among us, I was being told that. And I said, okay, you know. But thank you, God, for intervening. Thank you, God, that I was able to live. And thank you, God, that that moment increased my thirst for life, for living, for being resilient. And I tell my daughter this all the time. And as a matter of fact, we had a conversation. I said, should I mention that about when I was 14? She's like, why not? Why wouldn't you? That's true. That's your life. And I just think that I am so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be amongst people who embody the Jesuit values, who took in a little girl who rode up and down the street and looked at this big building and said, I want to go to Georgetown. And all my friends said, you can't afford to go to Georgetown. And I said, I sure can. And I never thought about it after that. But in the back of my mind and my heart, I knew this is where I needed to be. So I just want to tell everyone that it is gravely important to find, I'm going to use a word that's going to sound odd, find your ikigai. Let's say it again. Find your ikigai. Ikigai is the Japanese meaning for well-being, your reason for living. And I did not learn that on my own. If anyone has Professor Lovegrove, they will know that he taught it. But I did invest in a book and I invest in the studies, and I just wanted to say, once you find your reason for living, once you find what you value, what is worth it to you, is it life? Is it giving back? Is it just being here? Is it going to the school that you thought of when you were 14, 30 years later? Then do it. And I hope that that has met the mark of exceeding expectations. Thank you very much. That's my family.
We want to open it up for questions and answers. As much as our speakers are giving to this audience, we also want to have this be interactive. So if anyone has a question for Tamiko, we have some mics here.
I don't think this guy can.
Are you going to have any more kids?
I'm sorry, that's my father, no. We have one in the back.
I have had the pleasure to serve with Tamiko Collins in the military, and I wanted to know what was your passion behind deciding to join the military?
That's a very good question. My passion behind that was, we only received 15 minutes to talk, so I skipped a whole chunk of life. But I was briefly homeless, sleeping on a Norfolk State University bench, and I said, man, this is not cool. And let me look up my recruiter's phone number. And it was as simple as that. I wish it was more beautiful, but it was as simple as that. And now I became a military nurse, and I am still actually in the military. So, and I enjoy serving with you. Thank you.
Hi.
This is my daughter. I
Hi.
don't know what she's gonna say.
So, you always said not to drink the punch at parties. Like, just don't drink it. So, can that like kind of interfere, like intertwine with your speech?
I have a question.
Yes. Next question.
During these times that you've in your life, was there anybody there or anybody around you to motivate you to keep going?
Thank you. That is an amazing question as well as yours too, Madison. But and I failed to mention that you can't do this alone. There were so many people along the way, so many people that said, you can do it, Miko. You are worth it. You are better. And one was my high school teacher, School Without Walls, and she's now the principal. Although she called me Tamiko for 2 years, I do forgive her, but she kept telling me, keep going, keep going. So there were so many people. Even now, my entire cheerleading squad here, and I didn't plan these questions, guys. They're here, and they're here supporting me. So yes, there were a lot of people, and still today. And you are also one of them, so thank you. Yes. Maybe I would do another demo tape. No. That was a very good question. I think that I would, the only thing I would change I would change me not, this is all out of grammatical error, but I would change me not stopping, if that makes any sense, doing my poetry. Because this is the first time I performed spoke in a very long time. So that will be the only thing that I would change, because truthfully, all of the pain that I had, it's such a weird dichotomy. It has made me appreciate the pleasure that I have now. So that would be the only thing that I would change. Thank you.
I just have to clap again for that. That was amazing. And I'm very pleased again to introduce our second speaker, Juliet Sylvain. Juliet is an undergrad third-year student, double majoring in marketing and management. As a passionate entrepreneur and equestrian, she founded a startup called Caval, which connects buyers and sellers of horses on a mobile app. So let's give it up for Juliet.
Hi, everybody. I am super excited to be here. This is my first speech. I'm a bit nervous. I love the energy in this room. First, I want to give a round of applause to the team that put this together and this incredible first speaker. Once, I was lost, and I have yet to be found. When I was 5 years old, I found out that I hated the word no. I hated the word no so much that when my parents wanted to get me a dog and they said no, I started to act like a dog. I got on all fours. I bit other children at school. I wanted a dog so bad that my parents took me to a therapist to find out what was wrong with me. And that is how I got my dog. 12 years later, I was sitting in a dorm room that I didn't want to be sitting at, studying a major I didn't want to study, and attending a university I didn't want to attend. I started hearing a voice inside of me that said, this is not where I'm supposed to be. There has to be something more than this. And there was another voice that said, what if I pursued my dream major? What if I attended my dream university? And I listened to that authoritative voice inside of me. And I decided to take responsibility for my life and begin the application process for Georgetown. Mind you, applying to Georgetown was not easy. Did you know that you could be waitlisted not once, but twice at the university of your dreams? The first time that I was waitlisted, I decided to send an updated resume explaining all the extracurricular activities I had purposely chosen to be at Georgetown. The second time that I was waitlisted, I decided to send a letter explaining how much I understood what it meant to be a Hoya and how much I wanted to attend Georgetown. And here I am today. I am telling you this today for two reasons. The first one is I wanted you to get to know me a bit better. I was a pretty weird kid. I may have just lost all of my credibility. The door is right back there. The second reason is when you visualize yourself time and time again, eventually that is how you will find yourself. When I was a sophomore transfer, I attended a retreat for first-year students and transfers. And I had a very deep conversation with Reverend Matthew Carnes about following your what-ifs in life and pursuing your dreams. I realized that every single decision that I had made throughout my life had led me to Georgetown. And this didn't happen because I was lucky. When I imagine myself over and over and over again at Georgetown, I create vivid imagery that activates my visual cortex. This is the visual cortex in your back of your brain. And when you visualize yourself, there starts to create an imbalance between where you want to be and where you are right now. And your subconscious starts acting like a mediator, trying to help you find a balance by creating all those inner conflicts inside of yourself. It does this by activating the reticular activating system, also known as the RAS system. This is the RAS system. It activates your visual abilities, your hearing abilities, and all of your motors. And the RAS system basically allows you to see stimuli that you are aware and stimuli that you are not aware of. And once you start having that inner conflict, it starts asking yourself, what are the obstacles that I can overcome? What are the tasks I will need to sacrifice to get where I want to be? And your RAS system will allow you to start seeing opportunities and resources you weren't able to see before. You will start to be the ultimate creator of your own path and reality. This will be moments at 3 a.m. when you will wake up and you will figure out a way to create the entrepreneurial idea that you've always dreamed to create. There will be moments in the shower where you have pure genius about ways you can change your career. And this happens, I promise. When I was in high school, I was known as the horse girl. And right now, you're probably thinking, oh no, she's going to tell us another story about her childhood. But yes, I was the horse girl. I love horses, and I have been riding for 17 years. When I arrived at Georgetown, I got a bit lost. I got caught up in the recruitment for banking and consulting. I thought that EBITDA and the EPS ratio was all I ever had to learn to live for. But it wasn't until spring of my sophomore year at Georgetown that I wanted to pitch my first horse-related startup at the Startup Hoya competition. I went to see Jeff Fried, the founding director of the Georgetown Initiative program, and I told him my concern. I told him, they're going to think I'm another horse girl, aren't they? And he said, why not? Who cares? Do what you truly believe in. And while I didn't win the startup competition, I realized that passion is sexy. People love people with passion. People love seeing people having fun, enjoying themselves, and doing what they believe in. They want to see you succeed. They want to hire you. They want to see you transition career. Today, I am proud to say that I am paid to ride 16 horses a week. Today, I am proud to say that I have my own startup that basically connects buyers and sellers of horses on a mobile platform. And I am part of 2 accelerator programs. And I wouldn't have been able to achieve this without Jeff Fried and Reverend Matthew Carnes, who were there to support me and the community at Georgetown. When I arrived at Georgetown, I took the hardest accounting class ever known to men. And I found out I was no longer the smartest person in the room. I was surrounded by people who had created their own startup in high school. I was surrounded by people who had traveled places I hadn't even heard of. I was surrounded by people that created courses, even if that meant they were students of one, because that was true to them. Those are the people that inspire me and challenge me to create my own ideas. The entrepreneurs in residence, like Patricia Henricks, have taught me to pivot and pivot and pivot time and time again until my entrepreneurial ideas create value to my community. They taught me about magis, which is a Jesuit value for more and pursuing excellence. They taught me to serve women and men for others. They were the people that not only opened the doors, they opened that door for me, invited me in, and told everyone else around them about how amazing I would be at what I do. And I wouldn't be here without them. So now, before I leave you today, I'm going to walk you through a mental visualization exercise. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine where you are right now. What does your life look like? Where would you like to be? What will it take for you to get there? Once you're there, what will it feel like? Open your eyes. Once I was lost, and I have yet to be found. While I wish I could say that I have found myself at Georgetown, Georgetown has taught me that my life will have many opportunities and resources that I can take advantage of to constantly improve myself. Make it your mission to follow your dreams. Make it your mission to let your subconscious take advantage of opportunities and those resources. And I promise eventually you will be there. Thank you very much.
Again, I'd like to open up to questions. Yes.
Hi, your speech was fabulous. I can't help but wonder how you have adorned your ankles and what that means to you.
Sorry.
Your ankles, your tattoo?
I have. Oh, no, sorry.
Do you have a tattoo on your
Oh,
the
no, I
back of your
don't.
leg?
Those are mosquito bites. I just, I mean, they could be, very well could be, but no. Wish I could say.
Hi there.
Hi.
And so there are children here, and so it's nice to hear that you're an entrepreneur. You've started up early in life. What advice would you give them, these 13-year-olds who are in the 8th grade right now?
I would say that you should tell yourself that right now is only going to get better and that you're only getting started. You need to take advantage of all the opportunities that you can, even if they don't feel quite right. If they come up, just do it anyway and love what you're doing. And if you're scared of being embarrassed, then you're going to be great at being embarrassed. It's just going to be awesome. And take those opportunities. So that's what I would say.
Hi, congratulations so far. You are such a ray of sunshine, so it's great. So I have a question around, you talked a lot about visualization, and I completely agree with that. But just, can you talk a little bit about, you know, as you visualize, maybe you're still not going places, right? And how you would approach overcoming stagnation as you continue to visualize, but may not see what you want to see.
Mm-hmm. So I have another horse story about that. So throughout my life, I've always seen myself a professional in my sport. But when you ride horses, it's not just you. There's literally another animal that has a mind of its own. And you can't always get where you want to be, even if you visualize. And I think the way to overcome that is to always take a step back and appreciate where you are right now and look at all of what you have achieved right now. And every time you take a small right action towards what you're doing, your brain is going to get greedy. It's going to say, this feels good. And it won't be able to know whether what feels good is real or not real, and it'll want to do it again and again and again. And eventually you'll overcome that stagnation.
Yeah, thank you again for that. I'm now thinking about some ideas and some visualizations in my mind to get me through graduation. So I'm glad to present our third speaker for the evening, Wasim Abbas, who's actually in my cohort, so Hoyas, super proud of him. Wasim Abbas is a lawyer who works with work experience in the public sector in the Middle East. He worked with the top tier of politicians and diplomats in engaging stakeholders in political and economic growth. He managed the staff of the first Palestinian woman in the Israeli parliament. Also, he led critical thinking workshops in 10 countries across 5 continents. Currently, he is looking for his next career chapter in the private sector. Let's welcome Wasim.
When I first saw the email from the Hariri Symposium committee asking about students to share their experiences when they were lost, I started counting. Okay, I have 1 story, 2, 3, 1,400. Like, I have a lot of stories. Finally, something I'm eligible to apply for. So, okay, to give you a brief promo. So, I'm Wasim. I was born to a Muslim family and went to a Catholic school. I was born to a family in Cana. My father's side is from Cana, the village of Cana, and my mother is from the city of Nazareth. Yeah, those biblical places. And I'm Palestinian, and I hold an Israeli citizenship. So, you see the point? I should have gone for a joint degree, master's in business and PhD in contradictions. Okay, and so just can you see this red spot in that map, like this little spot? Yeah, that spot produces 90% of the international news on a daily basis consistently for a long, long time. So Cana and Nazareth are like only 7 miles away from each other, but there are differences there. And as a child, born in those 2 different places, that made me think a lot about a lot of things, but basically 2 questions. So the spoken Arabic is different than the formal one. The formal Arabic is only 1 language, which is common for all 300 million Arab speakers. However, accents can be very different between different places. And I don't mean like just between Egypt, Arabic is spoken in Egypt and spoken Arabic in Syria, but also between Cana and Nazareth, like those very close places to each other. So in Nazareth, they speak with this sophisticated accent, right? And in Cana, the masculine, strong accent. And as a child, I thought, okay, which accent should I adopt? Should I use the strong accent? But if I'm using this accent in Nazareth, because I went to a Catholic school in Nazareth, then I'll be perceived as savage. If I'll use my Nazareth accent in Cana, then I'll be feminine. That made me think a lot as a child. Okay, what should I do? And I wasn't comfortable with using two different accents, like one in Nazareth and one in Cana. The other question that I thought about a lot was religion. So as I said, I was born to a Muslim family. Relatively, like my big family is conservative. And I went to a Catholic school where most of my friends were Christians. And that made me think a lot about religions. Like how 2 religions that come from the same God, same source, are so different. And what struck me even harder was how come like they're so divided based on differences that are not really essential to religions, that shouldn't be essential to religions. Of course, not speaking about differences and divisions within the same religion, for different streams within the same religion. But that made me think deep, because as a child, I wanted to crystallize my own identity, to preserve myself. Now, my parents, God bless them, they're probably gonna watch this video over and over. Hi, Mom. Marhaba, Mom. So whenever I approached them for a question, they wouldn't answer with a question, with an answer. They would answer with a question. Because they wanted me to pave my own way, Of course, back then that was irritating for me because it was easier just to get answers. But growing up, I appreciated that a lot because that made me integrate critical thinking in my approach of how I look at things, how I critique my world around me and improve things around me. And I appreciate that a lot today more than back then. So digging with a lot of questions all the time was the right way for me after that to pursue a degree in law. Because all the time in law school, you would negotiate you would argue within different perspectives and weight each one. However, the experience was a little bit different. So there are a lot of diverse backgrounds at University of Haifa. However, inclusion wasn't its strongest feature. And many times I was not accepted. My identity was not accepted. So this time, I wanted to share my values. I wanted to share my backgrounds. I wanted to share what I believe in for different groups. And I wanted to avoid hypocrisy, right? Because, okay, I believe hypocrisy always exists, but there is legitimate and there's illegitimate hypocrisy. And I didn't want to be in a place where I customize my story to different people and then having a confused internal identity. And this time, contemplating and thinking about it wasn't that helpful. This time, what navigated answering those contradictions was hands-on experience. So through my off and on-campus activism, I learned how to do that by just speaking to people. And that was my lesson at university. That hands-on experience sometimes is the best experience. As a senior student at the law school, I was in the front of very critical decision to make. Okay, I knew what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about making changes. I'm passionate about making changes to status quo, things that I do not like. However, how exactly should I do that? Should I do that through commercial law, through civil law, through criminal law? What exactly? So I didn't take the first opportunity that wasn't on the table just because it was there. But I dig deeper and deeper. I wanted really to do something that I'm very passionate about. And that was probably one of the best things that I did, that I waited. I didn't rush. And through that time, I had the opportunity to lead the staff of the first Palestinian woman elected to the Israeli parliament, which was an amazing experience for me. It included feminist struggle, minorities struggle, you name it. And if I hadn't waited, I wouldn't know what I could miss. It's not only that I would have missed this opportunity, but I also wouldn't know what I could miss. So, working in politics, you can very fast realize that sustainability is not part of the game, right? Because elections are always on the door and decisions are gonna change based on people in charge. So I went to nonprofits. I co-founded a nonprofit, I worked in nonprofits, and I realized in the Middle East it's even more disrupted than everywhere else because nonprofits is always subject to funders and their agendas, their priorities, which can change overnight. So I wanted to make impact this time, but I wanted to have it sustainable. I want to have a sustainable impact. And that's why I thought that the private sector is the best way to do it. And that explains why I'm here at Georgetown pursuing an MBA. That's long story short. Okay, I wanna finish with this idea. I don't like to preach people because we're coming from different backgrounds, we have different personalities, we interact with realities in different ways, right? But I would highly encourage you to dig deep. When you're lost, make that an opportunity to dig deep rather than just picking the first thing on the table. Dig deep not only until you find your silverware, but dig deep until you find your diamonds. Thank you so much.
then opening up for questions.
Sure.
You had an interesting turn of phrase I want to ask you about. You said the phrase, there's legitimate democracy.
Right.
And I'm kind of curious what you mean by that. What distinguishes legitimate democracy from illegitimate democracy?
Okay, good question. Okay, so this is personal opinion, okay? I believe that we always have hypocrisies. But sometimes the social connotation makes it so hard for us to confess that we're hypocrite. You can think about personal examples. If you don't find, I'll share with you at the end of this ceremony, okay? But when you, like in Israel, Palestine, it's very sensitive. And like the phrasing sometimes, like concepts are very sensitive. So I could say, like, I could introduce my political views to a Zionist person in a way that would be very different when I'm doing that for my community, right? And that's where it becomes like when we start using different concepts to explain different things, I mean like to explain the same thing with very different ways, very different concepts, that might get you being hypocrite in the sense that you won't preserve your own values because you will interpret them totally different depending on your audience. I hope I answered the question.
Hi, thanks for sharing your story. So you mentioned that, you shared with us a lot about your past, and you mentioned that you want to make an impact in the future. Can you share with us a little bit about your plan or how you envision doing so?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so like currently I'm very, a friend advised me not to use the word thirsty because it has this connotation in the US, but that friend is not sitting far from here. Okay, so I'm very hungry about having to get an experience in the private sector. Okay, so I want, because I want to have sustainable impact in places, like to make an impact within the firms that I want to work with, that I want to work for. However, in the long term, I believe that education is the place where I want to be. I envision to establish or co-establish or be an active part of establishing an alternative education system in Israel and Palestine. I believe a lot that education is the bridge for lower levels and disadvantaged groups to make their way up. However, I envision this institution to be self-funded. And again, like the experience in the private sector is highly needed for me to pursue this dream. Thank you for the question.
Wasim, thank you for being a great example of moderation, dichotomy, and sensibility in the Middle East. Really admire you for that. But I do have a question for you. You've been here a little over a year. What's the lesson that you value most that you've learned in the last year, and how will you apply that in building sustainable impact?
Okay, you mean what I learned during this year that can make sustainable impact? Okay, so I learned that impact is possible. So when I first arrived, I thought that you can have an impact only in business if you combine it with the social enterprises. Like you need that to be in the core of your business, in the core of your idea, to have it social and business. However, I learned a lot about agents in companies, within companies, like companies in the private sector, how they can lead a change and to make a social impact while doing the daily business, like the daily business that they usually do. And that's a great thing to know, because that also gives us more responsibility. So everyone can have responsibility to make a change, whether in the public sector or the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fine there. Thank you, Wasim. I'm glad to introduce our last speaker for the night to close us out, and Emily Rosenfeld. Emily Shanae Rosenfeld has worked for Georgetown University for over 5 years and is currently the Associate Director of Strategic Innovation in Georgetown's Office of Advancement. She is a 2011 alumna of Amherst College and will graduate from the Evening MBA program in 2019 as a proud member of the Hilltop cohort. And with that, I introduce Emily.
Is this working? Good, okay. On August 6th, 2016, I started in the Evening MBA program here at Georgetown. 54 days later, on September 30th, 2016, my mother-in-law, Joanne, died. Now, before I tell you any more of my story, I feel it necessary to disabuse you of any stereotypes you may have about mothers-in-law. I have often joked that my mother-in-law was one of the best parts of marrying my husband. And over the 8 years that I knew her, she became one of my favorite people. So when she passed away, I was devastated. I was overwhelmed by being back in school after a 5-year hiatus and managing an increasingly complex job and supporting a spouse who had just lost a parent. And most of all, I was angry for a number of reasons, but not least of which because I was so busy with schoolwork for the opening term of my MBA that I spent barely an hour with Joanne when she came to visit us in August on what would end up being the last time I would ever get to see her. So, still very new to the MBA program and still so uncertain that my nonprofit working, anthropology degree holding, had not done math since 2007 self even belonged in an MBA program, I began to question why I would waste what precious little time I was given toiling away at statistics problem sets. And Professor Jose, if you're out there, I'm sorry. I thought about quitting. I thought, ooh, that's dead. I don't know why. Keep going. I thought very seriously about quitting the program because, in truth, I had already thought about it. I still tell the story sometimes about what happened at Airlie Weekend, the 3-day Virginia offsite during the intensive MBA opening term. It was right after the class where we discussed the Ndaka case. For the life of me, I still could not figure out the difference between vertical integration and horizontal integration, and when the class period broke, I beelined for my car, and I just drove away. I drove in a straight line away from Airlie, thinking to myself, what am I doing here? I do not understand any of this. I do not belong here. So when Joanne died a month later, it felt like a sign from the universe saying, it's okay to quit. You never wanted an MBA anyway. I went to Joanne's funeral in Alabama, and I told my husband, when I get back, I'm dropping out of my grad program. And that's when it happened. I went to class on Tuesday, and there, sitting on my desk, right here in classroom 350, was this card. And inside of the card, every member of my Hilltop cohort had written a message of love and support, and not only for me, but for my husband, who most of these people had not even met yet. These people I barely knew, with whom I felt as though I didn't belong, who 54 days ago I didn't even know existed. One message in particular stood out. Your Hilltop family is here for you. That was the night I decided not to quit the MBA program. That was the night that my classmates exceeded any and every expectation I ever had about the types of people that I would meet in an MBA program. And 2 years later, through the worst of it, these people, my Hilltops, are the reason I stay. Now, the story may not come as a surprise to some. The EP19 Hilltops have a bit of a reputation for being unusually close-knit. I wonder sometimes why. I'm sure they would all give you a different reason, but for me, it all goes back to something that Professor Pietra Rivoli said in that fateful SGI class. One of the unique features of SGI is that students can actually alter conditions of the course by submitting a proposal that their classmates then vote on. A common proposal, doing away with the peer grading element of the final project. But when this proposal came up in the Hilltop cohort, we ended up in a tie vote. Professor Rivoli's posture softened. Look, she said, you all are about to go through a lot together. You have got to decide now how you're going to treat each other for the next 3 years. There are going to be marriages and babies and major life events, and trust me, I have seen the cohorts who choose to be friends, and I have seen those who choose to be competitive, and the next 3 years are going to be a lot better and a lot more valuable if you choose to be friends today. Now, I am paraphrasing a bit here, but you get the idea. That is when Kenny spoke up. This is Kenny. Why don't we all just agree to give each other perfect fives? Some chuckled, some were a little skeptical, but everyone seemed to acknowledge that this could be a viable plan. Professor Rivoli said, look, you're welcome to do that, but it's not how the proposal was written, so you would have to do it on the honors system. Another brave classmate spoke up. I would like to change my vote. I think we should keep the peer grading, and we should use the Kenny plan. Now again, I'm paraphrasing a little. I don't actually remember who came up with the term the Kenny plan, but the point is that by and large, it actually worked. There were a few rogue fours at the beginning, but by the end, perfect fives and huge cheers after every class presentation. And ever since then, the term the Kenny plan is something that comes up in our Hilltop cohort whenever something requires teamwork or consensus or covering for each other when it's obvious that no one has read the case. We form study groups, we share notes, we act as de facto finance professors, and we support each other's learning. I credit the Kenny plan with setting the tone for the Hilltop cohort. And Professor Rivoli was right. There have been Hilltop babies, and we show up for each other's birthdays. We've gone to each other's weddings, and sooner than any of us expected, we were helping a member of the cohort, me, as it turned out, through the major life event of losing a parent. Fast forward 2 years. It's May 13th, 2018, Mother's Day, 591 days after Joanne died, and I find out that my mother has breast cancer. Now, what I left out of the beginning of my story is that Joanne died from complications related to the treatment of her breast cancer. So this time, it felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke on me. And my mother waited a week to tell me any of this, because I had just found out that my boss was leaving on 1 week's notice, and I was in the throes of MBA finals for APS, no less, and I was up to my eyebrows in work for our global business experience, the capstone of the MBA curriculum, or what I like to call SGI with real stakes. 2 years earlier, the loss of my mother-in-law was almost the end of my MBA career. But this time, everything was different. One of the first things I did when I got this news was call one of my GBE teammates, another Hilltop, to say, I am so sorry, I know I said I would do all this work for our group, but I've just got this news and I'm so overwhelmed. She stopped me. And even though she was going through her own challenges at work, she said, do not worry about this project. It is not what matters in your life right now. And this last part is a quote. She said, I am here for you as a friend and for the project. So I'm happy to say that my mother is actually doing really well, and everything went great with the GBE client, but I don't know what I would have done had I not known that I could reach out to a member of my cohort and say, I need help, and know that they would be there for me. So this is my love letter to the Hilltops. And this is also my advice for any MBA, but really for any person who knows they're going to be in the trenches with someone for any period of time. Choose early on how you want to treat each other. Choose to support each other. Have a Kenny plan. Because Professor Rivoli was right. The competitiveness that plagues most business programs is not worth it. And when you look back at what you've gone through, you'll probably feel the same way that I feel about my Georgetown MBA. Although I've learned a lot, and I am grateful for the education, the people are what have mattered the most to me. They are what have gotten me through the most difficult times, and our friendships are what will endure long after we've forgotten how to run a regression. So to my Hilltops, Up top. Thank you. Questions? Dave?
So also having lived through the DACA case, also having, thought about quitting for, multiple different reasons at multiple different times, very different from your reason. I guess my question is, I know that there are other people that are thinking about quitting, not MBA programs, but other things. How are you planning on taking this experience forward, and what would you say to people in that experience, in that situation?
Ooh. Dave, that's a tough question. And it's funny that Dave should be the one to ask the question, because Dave was actually the first member of my cohort that I went to and said, I think I'm going to quit. And Dave looked at me and he said, you're not going to quit. I said, no, really, I am. He said, you're not going to. And he was right. I think it's very important in life to be willing to be vulnerable and be willing to say, I am in need of help. And as someone who has recently taken on managerial responsibilities, I have tried very hard to create a space where the people in my life feel comfortable coming to me to say, I need help. I don't understand this project, or I can't figure out how to move forward. So to anyone in that type of a position, I think I'd say create those spaces where there's psychological safety for your team to actually feel vulnerable and be willing to ask questions, because the difference for me between quitting and not quitting was knowing that there were people there who would actually support me. And for people who are in positions of feeling like they need to quit, I think seeking out those mentors and those friends in your life who understand you, not necessarily as an employee or as a student, but as a person, is extremely important. Being able to, again, have those kinds of vulnerable conversations about where you are, because truthfully, the conversation you and I had, conversations I had with people up here, are really what changed everything for me. Any other questions? Okay.
I would like for us to all clap one more time for all of our speakers and the amazing job that they did this evening. And with that, I invite Dean Almeida back up to the stage.
I feel incomplete talking after all those speeches, but to all of you, really, Tamiko, Juliet, Wasim, Emily, thank you so much. You make me proud to be your colleague. I really mean that. You can see that Georgetown's a special place. And it's a special place because of students like these and all their colleagues, even the ones who ask tough questions over there, the professors. It's a wonderful place. We truly believe in community, as you stressed. We truly believe inspiring ourselves and each other to reach for the imaginable. And, I believe so deeply in what all of you said. You talked about a journey, and the journey is never complete. So thanks. I learned so much. And I was thinking when they were talking that wonderful students like this and wonderful faculty and staff that we have deserve a wonderful setting. And the Rafiq B. Hariri building is a wonderful setting for us to learn, for us to engage as a community. If you walk up to the second and third and fourth floor, you see all those chairs and students casually getting together and chatting and engaging with each other. And if you look up into the atrium, you can literally reach out for the skies. And I think it's the perfect building that embodies so much of what you all talked about. So, as I mentioned earlier, tonight we will unveil and dedicate a bust in honor of the late Rafiq B. Hariri, the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, who was assassinated in 2005 when his motorcade was targeted with an explosion. That act cut short the life of a man who believed in the power of education to bring about change. Even though he first intended to be a teacher, Mr. Hariri shifted to the construction industry and he became a very successful businessman. And now this allowed him to support numerous educational causes, starting with the Hariri Foundation, which he founded in 1979 to help Lebanese students attend colleges all over the world. Just as Georgetown University was established to educate future leaders of a brand new America and the world, Mr. Hariri hoped his support of Lebanese students would allow his country to emerge from the civil war with strong leaders for generations to come. As a Georgetown parent, Mr. Hariri was a generous supporter of the university and served on the Parents Advisory Council at the McDonough School of Business. In 1996, the university awarded him an honorary degree in celebration of his work to advance education and opportunity for the underprivileged. For his belief in the transformational role of education and for his work to improve the lives of so many people, we are proud to call the Rafiq B. Hariri Building our home. And with the bust we will unveil, we will ensure that the memory of his work and his life continues within our community. It's now my pleasure to invite Rafiq Bizri first and Marty Eichinger to the podium. Rafiq is the president of Hariri Holding and leads the Hariri Foundation USA, an organization that has sponsored 2,300 scholars in the US and Canada. Marty Eichinger is the founder of Eichinger Sculpture Studio. His work is represented by fine art galleries throughout the United States and is included in more than 1,000 private and corporate collections around the world. So welcome Rafiq and then Marty.
Good evening. First, congratulations on the speakers. It was impressive and great to hear all your stories. Thank you so much. I'm going to probably repeat some of the items that Dean Almeida mentioned, but I'm going to go ahead with my pre-prepared statements. Dean Almeida, directors, faculty, students, Georgetown University alumni, distinguished guests and friends. Thank you for joining us this evening for the unveiling of the Rafiq Hariri bust. My sincerest gratitude goes to President DeGioia, Dean Almeida, and all former dean and managing directors. Without their commitment and efforts, this would not have been possible. I would also like to thank the artist, Marty Eichinger, whose creative work has been essential in capturing the spirit of the late Rafiq Hariri. For those of you who are not unfamiliar with the work of the late Prime Minister, he was a politician, philanthropist, a businessman, and who believed strongly in social responsibility and building the human resources of Lebanon through education and humanitarian program. He touched many lives, and through his generosity, he sponsored more than 35,000 students worldwide. Rafiq Hariri once said, and I quote, "We cannot just take for granted and enjoy our achievement without helping society. Knowledge must be combined with wisdom and be aimed at promoting progress, unquote. How befitting that this memorial bust will be housed at the Rafiq B. Hariri building at the McDonough School of Business, where knowledge is exchanged and community outreach is emphasized. We hope that Rafiq Hariri's work and vision will inspire Georgetown University community for the generations to come. Thank you so much.
Hello, what an honor for me to be here. I'm a narrative sculptor from Portland, Oregon. I'm not really a figurative sculptor, and I've made lots of figures, but that's not really what's important to me. It was really delightful to come here and find out that we had speakers who didn't really speak about the academic things that we out in Portland, Oregon think that you're studying here. You told your stories about what makes your life meaningful, and that is really meaningful for me as a sculptor. That's what I'm trying to capture in my work. And so a couple of years ago, when we first began this process, I sat with Rafiq and Christian and Jim Moore, who I think is here someplace. Where are you, Jim? It's really good to see you and have you be here. That we sat around a table with the question of, well, who exactly was this man? And I knew a little bit about him. He'd been in the newspapers. I was aware of the assassination, but I really didn't know who he was. And it came down to him being a person who was described as having a three-legged stool. And so I'm a visual artist, and I'm trying to imagine, okay, I want to have this guy sitting in a three-legged stool. That does not seem like a very graceful place for me to put this sculpture. And it turned out that that three-legged stool was the three principles of business, education, and your politics all having to work together to create harmony between people. And that is what I think he did in the Middle East, and I think that's probably why he was even assassinated. He was working extremely hard to bring people together and to create cooperation with those three things. And business reaches across politics and helps us figure out how to get along across political divides, ideological divides, and I'm just really honored to be able to have done the work we're going to unveil here in a few minutes of Rafiq Hariri. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bizri. Mr. Eichinger, thank you so much, not just for your words, but for everything you've done to make this moment possible. This has been a wonderful evening, but the most important part of the evening is to follow. We would be very pleased if you could join us in the first floor atrium. Please exit from this door. We will unveil the bust, and then there's a reception to follow. So thank you all very much.